Hello, this is a demonstration of the time series analysis on the AQA S2 syllabus, and I'm going to use January 2011 question 3 as an example. So what's the first thing we do on all questions is read the question. The table shows quarterly household expenditure in millions on shoes and other footwear in the United Kingdom during 2006, 2007, 2008. That's set out in a table. So what have we got here? Looking into the table, we've got expenditure. There's a 12889 is the first one, broken down into quarter and year. And then we've got 12 quarters here. Let's start seeing what it wants us to do. First, calculate the first two values of a suitable moving average and add these to the figure, which is on a graph sheet, which we'll get to in a short while, which shows further values of suitable moving average. Okay, so let's have a look. First question for us is, what is a suitable moving average? Well, as we saw, the data is broken down into year and quarter, so 4 quarters in a year. So a suitable moving average would therefore have to cover a whole year of 4 quarters, so it should be a 4-point moving average. 4-point moving average. So the first value of 4-point moving average will cover the first 4 expenditure points. So that's 1289 through to 1992. And to find the moving average, we're going to add those up and we're going to divide them by 4. So that would give us our first point here would be 1574.25. Okay, then our second point, I'm going to move along one, and our moving average, I'm going to take the numbers 1544 through to 1306, and that will give us second moving average of 1578.5. Okay, and we would then repeat this process, but actually they've carried it out for us. So what we now need to do, it asks us to do, second part of this is add these figures, add these to figure 1. So let's have a quick look, and here is what we've got. Now the only thing I would say here is, I'll just demonstrate the first one because I think that's important that we get that in the right place. So our first moving average is covering the 4 quarters of 2006, and the moving average must be put at the midpoint of those numbers, so it will go here up the middle of this column. If I was doing this in the exam, I might actually mark that column just so it's obvious to us what we're doing. Okay, and I'm just going to position this. It's difficult on the computer to see everything at the same time. So here we're going up column straight up there, and I now need to position our point at 1574. Now here we can see we've got 1500, that's 1600, and there's 10 of the small squares, so each of the small squares is worth 10, so 1574 is basically halfway through that. So halfway up the 7th square, so that will give us a point here. And what we have to do is moving average points is we have to put a dot and a circle around it. So that's basically what we're doing. That's marking our first point, and our second point will be a repetition of that. We're moving along by 1 quarter, so the midpoint will be 5 points over, and this one is going to be 1578. So on this scale it's pretty well at the same height, just needs to be for 5 squares over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there we are, 1578, probably slightly higher up. There we are, 1578. And we're going to put a circle around that. Again, we put a circle around that. So that would basically satisfy the first part of the question. Okay, what's it asking us to do in part B? It's saying draw a trend line. So here it's asking us to do a trend line. We don't have to do a full regression or anything like that. We just have to write our best fit line. So that's by I, yeah. So at this point we just have to draw one on. I'm not doing a regression case. So I need to pick a line which is best fit through those points. I know the question a bit further on is going to ask me to estimate future, so I will bear that in mind in drawing the line, given we've got a whole number of points here on the right hand end. So I would literally go through and put a line through it, and I'm going to do that a sec while I stop the video so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I've added a trend line, which is my best fit line through my eye. I've taken it right out to the right hand end here because the questions are going to ask us to predict a future point, and I've also gone to the other end to cover off. So in a minute we're going to have to plot all of the source data. So what's the next question they're going to ask us to do? So we've just completed draw a trend line. Now it says plot the data from the table. So I'm going to get on and do that next. Okay, so I've plotted all of the source data. That's all the expenditure figures from the table in their positions on the diagram. These are all the black squares. So as we can see here, we can see that the Q1 figures here, these arrows, these crosses down the bottom. There's 1, 2, 3 in a row. 1, 2, 3, all on the low side. And the Q4 figures are all on the high side. Here's 1 here, 2, 3. Okay, so we've carried out that part and completed that part of the question. What are they asking us to do next? They're asking us to estimate the seasonal effect. Okay, and there are a series of ways that we can do this, and I'm going to start with the basic graphical one, and then I'm going to move on and demonstrate from there. So let's get ourselves back on this diagram and have a look. So we're interested in the seasonal figures for Q1, and near the moving averages we've got 2 points within the moving averages. There's one here and there's one there. So there are 3 ways of working out what the seasonal effect is. First one, 2 variants around looking at the moving average. So the first one is looking at the moving average and doing the moving average, comparing it to the moving average and doing so graphically. So I'm going to do that one first. And here we want to compare the actual position of the point with where the moving average says that it should be. So what I'm going to do is create a midpoint here between these 2 here, and moving up to the next one, these 2 here. That should be blue. There we are. And we need to find the midpoint. So the midpoint should be directly above where the actual point is. So I'm going to put across there and across here. And then what we would do, doing this graphically, is we're going to measure down the line to that point. And we're going to measure that distance. So in this case, we would get from the crossing point to that top point, we would get 290, approximately 290. So that's all we can do here is get the approximate, isn't it? We've got 1610 at the top, we got so our figure at the point at the bottom, roughly 1310, and our position at the top is midpoint is 1590, so the difference is minus 280. Here we go. If I did the same thing on the second point, so I'm going to correct that a moment. That's this figure here is 1690, and that's therefore 280. So 1600, and that one's therefore 290. If we did the same calculation here on the second point, we'd have our top point there's, so our bottom point here is 1370. Our top point here is roughly 1640. So the difference between the two, 1370 minus 1640 would give us minus 270. Okay, so we've got two numbers for the seasonal effect, and what we would need to do then is just average the two. So we've got an average of minus 290 and minus 270, and the average of those two is minus 280. So that's a pretty straightforward way to do this if you're doing it graphically. You could also do this using the figures you've got, because you've got the exact figures on your table, and we could construct those and carry out exactly the same calculation. I'm going to do that in purple. I could carry out exactly the same calculation, the moving average, and do it with the exact figures from table. So if I took the exact figures for the two moving averages for the first quarter 1 point, I'd have 15.39.75, and I'd so 1539.75 for the moving average on the left, and the moving average on the right will be 1609.75. So if I average those 2 points to get this value, the central point, the midpoint, we'd be at 1601.75. So I take that figure, the actual figures here on the left for the first point from the table. So the actual value at Q1 is 1306. Take off the 1601, I get minus 295.75. If I do the same exercise over on the second point on the right hand side, I get a difference of minus 265.25, and if I take the average of those, I would get 280.5. So you can see they've come out with a very similar figures. Okay, one final way of doing this is number 3, where we're doing the graphical. We can do the graph against the trend. Okay, so for this one, rather than using the midpoint that we used up here, we're going to use, I'll just mark it with an arrow, that point there where the quarter 1 crosses the trend line. And similarly, we would use on the upper figure, we'd use the trend line point there where that crosses the quarter again, and we'd carry out similar calculations. So I'll just do that. So here we have for the first quarter there in 2000 and quarter 1 2007 in the green on the left, we have top the bottom point is still at 1310 by I, and the intercept point between the trend line and the quarter 1 is 1590. Enough to take one away from the other, I get minus 280. And on the right hand side, if we're looking at the right blue line up to the green intercept point, We've got 1370 for the lower point, and we're going to take away the 1650 for the upper point. And again, we're going to get minus 280. If we average those two figures, we would get a value of minus 280. So each one of these, any of the three methods is valid. You can use any of the three methods with the examiner, and the examiner will accept it. So here, I'm just going to put that figure up there that I think each one of those basically came to minus 280. Minus 280. That's in, say, millions, isn't it? I think expenditure in millions, minus 280 compared to the trend line. I thought I'd just show you, as far as the examiner is concerned, the examiner calculated that it was minus 285. But the range, the examination range that the examiners would allow would be between minus 265 and minus 295. So you can see we're well within that. It's a pretty wide range, and they've got to give you a wide range because you are doing a lot of estimation here. Okay, let's have one last look and finishing off on this question. Part D, estimate the expenditure. Q1 2009, so they want us to go off the end to the right hand end of the graph and indicate the method that you've used. So the method is, our estimate would be, the estimate or prediction, that's what you'd usually be using here, equals our long-term trend. Our long-term trend adjusted for our seasonal effect. Okay, so how can we find our long-term trend? Well, we drew our trend line, so let's have a look where that would be at Q1. So our green line is our trend line, and at Q1 we predicted that the trend line would take us to, I'm going to mark it in blue there, this point here. Okay, so that's given us a value of 1705. That's the trend line. Then we've got to adjust, make our seasonal effect, adjust for that, and in this case it's minus 280. So that would give us a result of 1400 and 1425. So we could then use that to position our on this line, and we would get a point, sorry, which is going to be inside our purple here. It's going to be roughly there, isn't it? So that's what we would expect, that's what we would predict will bring us to a point there at 1425. Okay, so using that, we're going to get a result of 1425, and we get 3 marks for that. Okay, what's the range? The examiner range for this, again, it's got to be pretty wide, and they're giving us a range, just so you know, put it in context. The examiner range, I'll just write it here, is 1390 to 1440. So again, that's a pretty wide range. And that is basically the question. That's typically what they will do. Finally, here's our summary. I'd like to give you at the end of each of these videos, and this is a summary for time series analysis. First thing you have to do is select a suitable moving average. Typically these questions are 4-point, they're quarterly, so you're looking for a 4-point moving average. Remember to mark, when you come to graph it, mark the point at the midpoint of the 4 points. Yeah, so it's halfway between the middle two. Work out your long-term trend by drawing a line of best fit. So just go through your points on the graph and do that by eye, line of best fit. Then you need to work out your seasonal effect, and we had 3 ways of doing it: but all of them basically come down to finding the difference between either the moving average or the trend line to the actual point for that quarter, and it'll change for every quarter, so it can be quarter one or quarter two, etc. So you can either do it graphically or you can do it with a calculator. And finally, when they ask you for an estimate or prediction, you've got your trend line point, that's telling you what your long-term trend is, and then you've got to add your seasonal effect. And if you go through that process, you will get all the marks for that. So hope that's useful, and thank you for watching.